Hi, my name is Blackpaw. I'm the little person behind the little fire dude. Um, I had some friends ask me recently to do a bit of a tutorial on my shading, and I really haven't done one of these before, so this isn't, something I'm used to. But I'm excited to be here and talk to y'all. Um, I don't think I've actually ever shown my voice on the blog before, but let's get into it. As you can see from my first steps, what I do is I actually select my entire drawing in that I select all the spaces that are going to be blank, and then I start layering the colors. So I start with my highlights usually, just because it's easier to figure out where the lighting is coming from. So then I can put the shadow over it. And then I, make them a little more opaque so it isn't as harsh. And then what I start doing is I start layering a lot. And that's mainly what I do when I'm shading, is I use my watercolor tool. I use the more opaque options if I can. And I use my blend tool a lot, because Gaussian blur isn't enough. And the way that the watercolor tool works in Clip Studio is it kind of like pulls the colors around it, so it doesn't work to the degree that I would need it to. So that's mainly what my focus is just using this watercolor tool in all the places where the highlights go first on a separate layer to my original shading, and then I make another layer for my shadowing. And as you can see, like, the shadowing and the highlighting overlap a lot, and I find that adds a lot of depth in the entire drawing. You got parts of the highlighting that's way brighter than others, parts that are duller, and then parts where the shadows are just really rich and dark in comparison to others, and I find that's really important to find out where all your little nooks and crannies, and it helps in your head if you figure out what sticks out where and what is more behind. So, like his tooth on his mouth up there, it sticks out, so it's going to be a little brighter than the rest of his face, or his brow ridge is further out, so it would have more lighting on it. Same with his cheekbones. So, that's my main goal, is just to figure out how to add the most depth, make it really harsh at first. As you can see here, it's all really bright and harsh and sharp. And then I go through with my blend tool and I start smoothing it out and, just really making it blend in with the background that it's involved in. And I just find that's really important, because it adds that fluence to it, that it doesn't have fluency. That's still not the right word, is it? It makes it run together better, and it just, it helps pull the piece together. And then, I think it's coming up in a little bit, you'll see that in some spaces I will actually erase some of my highlighting, if it comes off the pieces where I don't want it to be. So, I guess that's not coming up yet. But, the main goal right now is just to get the basics out. So this is only the second layering, but it's kind of really the first in a way, because this is where it really matters, where I pay attention to the detail, instead of just throwing it together. Yeah, you see here I'm erasing it a little bit on the clothing parts because it was too dark over the highlights. And that really muddies it and, subtracts from the brightness of it. And that's not what I want with the highlights. I want them to really pop on this layer. Even though this layer isn't the brightest one of it. So see here, I'm going to dim it down by a lot. And yet that subtle lighting still adds to it. After that, I merge them with the original layer, and then I move on to the second layering. This is where I start paying attention to the finer details. I generally use a bit of a smaller brush, not always. You see where I didn't highlight before, I start adding more subtle highlights, and then I go into places that were already highlighted and brighten them even more. As you see here, I pay attention to the wrinkles more. Instead of making it one big motion, I actually try to do each wrinkle individually. And same with the, I can't remember, I think wings? I don't remember what they're called, but the parts of the spine, I highlight those a little more instead of just making them one big motion. I focus on these smaller motions and making them stand out and really look 3D. Because, they stand off the spine, and so it's important to capture that as best as possible. which was a lot harder from the original angle that I did this. And a lot of people who follow my blog or saw the original piece know that this isn't how I originally highlighted this piece, but I wanted to redo it at a different angle and show that the piece would look just as good in any other angle, and that highlighting does actually change the mood. I'll show the original piece at the ending. But yeah, this is really all it is. It's just working through and layering and just thinking about it from a third dimensional perspective. Imagine turning it around, like here where the shadows don't go over every piece, but they still cover a majority of the spine there. That's important. It makes it look deeper and really gives it life and energy, I think. You can see I also focus on shading the insides of the ribs, because they are, they're further away, they're on the other side of the rib cage, and so at this angle they would be darker, but in my original piecing I actually highlighted those more, because the lighting was coming from inside the rib cage. That's mainly the goal on this part, is just to, make it look darker and lighter where it was lacking before, and to just draw the eye to those areas, or to add that little bit of depth that they were missing. These ones don't have to be as careful, I suppose, because they are already highlighted in those areas a lot, so I can be a little more loose with them, especially because they're going to get blurred a lot. But it's still important to pay attention to these things and add those little details. So as you can see here, I'm also going to erase around the tooth, because the inside of the mouth was too highlighted on that one. And then the back of the jaw got highlighted there, which is not the goal I'm looking for at this stage, and with this particular shading. But the back of the skull and things like that have that more messy, that kind of interlops with shadow in some areas, because the shadow curves around the shape in some places, so it's really important to focus on that. And sometimes the details kind of vanish, but in a way it also pops more when it does, especially when you add the shading over it, because then you still have that overlap of highlight and shadow, and it adds to it. And that's basically what I do on these stages. Actually, the stages coming up next is one of my favorites. And I will let you know this is going a lot faster than what I originally did. I had to speed this up a little bit because this was originally 23 minutes long. So it doesn't take that long, actually. Shading is one of the quicker parts of my art style. I think line art takes the longest, and coloring the second longest. I color very inefficiently, but I don't like coloring any other way. I generally tend to fill it in with one solid color and then work it out from there. But shading is honestly the part that takes me the longest, or sorry, that takes me the shortest. And it's one of the parts I enjoy the most, because it's really when the piece comes to life. Like, color is an important stage, but shading is something that really just adds to it. It changes how the piece looks and feels entirely. Like, if I used a blue lighting or something like that, it would make it look sadder, or if I used, like the original had, more of this pinkish red hue that added some sort of mysterious feel to it, This is my favorite part of shading, where I cover it in my shadow color, which is always dark blue, or a kind of purplish color, which I recommend looking at the shadows around you to really figure out how it would look, because a lot of the shadows are more red or blue, but nothing in between. So it's important to really pay attention to that. So what I'm basically doing is subtracting the shadow instead, and erasing where the highlights are. There's going to be chunks that are larger, and then I add a second layer of the same shadowing, and I get rid of even more, so it adds another layer of shadow to it. And then I've found that more layer of shadows looks better than less. It really richens the dark and makes the light pop more. So then what I do is I duplicate my fully shaded layer, because they're all put in one, and then I erase that a bit, so it adds even more depth. So you get these areas that have more highlighting and more rich shadows than others, and then I combine them all into one layer. And that's basically how I do it on the body. After that, I do some shading on the canvas, so that really, makes it pop. Everything I do on the other layers is done below my line art. And then when I shade the rest of the canvas, it's done over the line art to add that little extra bit of depth and feeling to it. So it really, it makes it look less sharp between line art and shading, and that's something that I feel is important, because it really draws the piece together, at least in my experience. So as you see here, I add the highlighting, and then I add the white in the center to show where it's brightest, and then from there I try to angle my shadows from where the body is, so the face, forehead down, and all of that, and then I highlight that and fill in the rest of the canvas as need be. And yeah, that's basically how I do it. It was really fun to get to talk about this. It's not something I normally do, and to be honest, it probably showed, but I was a little nervous through the whole thing. Like I said, I really haven't put my voice on the blog before, and the few times I have been me doing a voice or singing, both very poorly in my opinion. Sorry, I bumped the mic. But that's how I shade my pieces. If you guys want tutorials on anything else, I am happy and willing to do so. And that's it. Bye-bye.